What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you the winners and losers of the September 2018 ban list. We've had about 24 hours or so to kind of digest all these different changes that we have to look forward to. So I wanted to give you guys my initial impressions as to what decks came out on top moving into this new format and what decks just got utterly obliterated, because I feel it's good that we have a little bit of insight knowing what we can expect moving forward. But before we do, I just have to give a huge shout out to my newest patrons as always. So big shout out today to Michael, Goosey, and Austin. You guys are the reason that this channel is growing strong. And if you guys want to help support me in the channel through Patreon or through a YouTube channel membership, hit the join button down below or check out the links in the description. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the winners, because even though this list brings a lot of changes, there's actually a lot of winners when it comes to this ban list. Starting off with Goki. Yeah, I mean, sure, we had Nightmare Goblin get banned, we had MX Saber Invoker get banned, but Goki relatively didn't really get hindered all that much. I mean, Goki is still able to perform 2-card extra late combos. Yeah, it might be a little bit more specific in which cards you need. You might need at least one Goki monster, and you kind of take away the rank 3 engine, which Invoker, I think, kind of enabled the deck to be a lot more consistent. But being able to still go into Isolde with at least one Goki monster is still very easy. You have Marauding Captain, you have Junk Forward, you have Instant Fusion. There's plenty of ways to get multiple warriors on the board, including one Goki. And the fact that you're still able to extra link, you're still able to Gumblar, you're still able to do all the things that Goki has been able to do, I definitely think it's still one of the strongest contenders moving into this format. Now, it kind of got an indirect hit with Called by the Grave going to 2, which means there's a 10 to 11% less of a chance that your opponent's going to open that, meaning that your hand trap is more likely going to go through to stop the Goki player, especially if you draw multiple copies. So that's kind of an indirect hit, but ultimately Goki is still looking strong and a very good option moving into this next format. Next up, we have Sky Striker, and honestly, Sky Striker almost came out of this list completely unscathed. Now, a lot of people will argue that Hornet Drones going to 1 is definitely going to make a difference, but relatively, pure Sky Striker really doesn't care, because you have to remember, they still have 3 copies of Ray plus a reinforcement of the army, so it's like they already have 5 copies of Ray available anyway, even more than that when you count the copies of Engage in addition to it. So yes, having less Hornet Drones hurts, but at the same time, Hornet Drones is at 1 in the OCG, and Sky Striker is still the best deck of their format. Now, to be fair, they do have Needle Fiber, so that makes things a lot easier, especially from an aggression standpoint, in the fact that that deck can just completely OTK you out of nowhere with the Borosword OTK. However, I still think that doesn't take away from the fact that Sky Striker might be one of the strongest decks, if not the strongest deck of this current format. It still has all the engages, it has Widow Anchors, and Nightmare Goblin getting banned actually helps this deck tremendously, because now Widow Anchor is a viable option to counter the Goki Extra Link, because now you can negate monsters, you can force negations because they can be targeted because Goblin no longer exists. There's a lot of really cool things that Sky Strikers now have opened up because of some of the hits on this list have enabled them to do. So Sky Strikers definitely aren't going anywhere, and that leads us on to Trickstar. So by extension of Sky Striker, you can look at this either through a pure Trickstar lens or a Trickstar Sky Striker lens, whichever way you want to look at it, but Trickstar also came out of this list completely unhindered. I mean, yeah, it lost a Terraforming, and yeah, I guess it lost a Scapegoat, and you could say if you're playing Trickstar Sky Striker, you lost a couple copies of Hornet Drones, but realistically, the deck is still extremely playable. You can even play Trickstar in a pure form with a lot more traps, and the deck will still function just fine. I am actually in shock that Light Stage didn't get hit, that Reincarnation didn't get hit. There's so many powerful Trickstar cards that this deck, especially in a format that's completely undefined at the moment, Trickstar is looking like a very solid deck, and don't be surprised if you see a lot of Trickstar going into the 200th YCS. Beyond that, though, there's still plenty of other decks that were also just completely unfazed by this list. I mean, look at Altergeist. Altergeist did not get a single hit on the entire list, and by other decks being brought down and getting a check on their power, that kind of just brings Altergeist up and makes it a much more appealing option. Draco's another deck. I mean, yeah, they lost a Terraforming, so that's one less Dragonic Diagram in theory, but it still has all of its tools, it has all of its stun cards. Card of Demise didn't get hit, Dragonic Diagram didn't get hit. This this is still going to continue to be a very powerful deck moving forward. And hell, look at Invoked. Invoked is another archetype that managed to scrape by. I mean, Invocation didn't get touched, Alistair didn't get touched, Makaba didn't get touched. These are cards that all got hit in Japan, yet they're not going to see hits here, and that could still be a very viable deck moving forward into this format. There's a lot of other winners, though, that move beyond kind of the tier 1 and tier 2 category, and that's something like Burning Abyss. Burning Abyss has been a very solid, rogue contender that has able to compete at the North American WCQ or just all the nationals in general. Dante's still legal, Seer is still around, Beatrice is still around. I think Burning Abyss can do just fine, and guess what? Card Destruction's legal now, so if you want to just do some shenanigans with that, that's going to be perfectly okay. Heroes are definitely a winner here. Stratos came back to 1. It was at the expense of 2 copies of A Hero Lives, which is debatable which is better, but A Hero Lives did need to get hit because it does enable a 1-card Extra Link and or FTK. I did just find out about that, so yeah, I'm kind of okay with Hero Lives getting hit under those circumstances, but it's one of those things where, hero players can rejoice. In addition to that, you have Super Poly now as well, which is one of Hero's favorite cards because they have so many good options to fuse into because of the Hero engine. A couple of other winners are Danger. So Danger is really interesting because card destruction is legal, but also because we don't know what the support's going to be coming out of Soul Fusion, but it looks like they're kind of trying to push us onto Danger by releasing cards like Card Destruction and even Morphing Jar from the ban list. Now, will Morphing Jar see play? I don't exactly know, but it's another viable outlet to be able to just generate tons of advantage for a deck that relies on discarding cards. Another winner here is Cosmo. That's right, Cosmo Dark Destroyer did go to 2, and realistically, I think this is a very good rogue option at the moment because Dark Destroyer is a very powerful card, and when it was only at 1, it wasn't really as scary, but now that you have 2, that's something you're really going to have to consider, and honestly, it's a very good affordable deck. It's very cheap. Karta Demise is still legal, so you can still play Cosmo Demise. I think there's a lot of potential there, and don't be surprised if you go to a regional to see someone trying this deck out. The last winner is Burn. Now, I know this is kind of stretching, but it's kind of funny to see Ring of Destruction at 3, and Morphing Jar is inadvertent burn support because you can set your whole hand, set a Morphing Jar, you can just burn through all your burn spells, flip the Morphing Jar, and now you get a whole new hand, kind of just accelerating the pace at which you can burn out your opponent. So, kind of, inadvertent support, but if someone wants to try playing Burn, hey, you've got these tools now available to you. And one last winner I thought about are people that want to go second or want to have the ability to go second, because with the release of Evil Swarm Exciton Knight and Super Polymerization from the Forbidden list, these cards actually enable players to go second without feeling like they fell so far behind. These are 2 really good comeback mechanic cards, which are very debatable in terms of how powerful they are and whether or not they should be legal again. I think they do something that's rather interesting for the game, kind of similarly to something like Evenly Matched, but in their own way. Now, will they be viable enough? Time will tell, because Evil Swarm Exciton Knight requires you to basically be playing level 4s, and Super Polymerization is very specific, although there are some fusion monsters that help mitigate those requirements. So we'll just have to see, but they are nice tools that are going to be available for players to experiment with. But now it's time to move on to the losers of the ban list, and I know you guys are looking forward to this the most. So starting off with, we have the FTK decks. This is apparent with the banning of Samsara Lotus, and I think it's really good that Konami's actually being preemptive with cards like Samsara Lotus and Phoenixian Cluster Amaryllis, things like that, just to ensure that some of these FTKs don't bleed into our format. Now, to be fair, they could hit more problematic cards, but I guess that's a discussion for another video. This is kind of where ABC also got hit with the limitation of A Assault Core. It's really unfortunate that A Assault Core had to be the collateral damage in this instance, but pretty much to prevent the FTK from being viable, I guess that is what had to happen. So I'd probably say that ABC is the biggest loser out of this entire list. The next loser is, any deck that spammed Psyframe Lord Omega. I mean, I'm talking about zombie variants. Those are usually typically the decks that did so. I think there was also a Junk Speeder kind of hand loop going around the card that came out of the Megatins. I'm kind of glad Psyframe Lord Omega is at 1, because at 1, I think it's perfectly fine, but when you have multiples, it just kind of encouraged degenerate hand looping, and that wasn't really fun for anyone. So having it at 1 I think is perfectly acceptable, and I think a lot of people would agree with that hit, even though it is unfortunate for anyone who did enjoy some zombie synchro spam. The next loser is really anyone who wanted to stop hand traps, because Called by the Grave is now at 2, and I think the general consensus around this is that people are not happy with this. Now, the positive side of this is that for any combo deck like, say, Goki, for instance, that wants to play Called by the Grave, it basically lowers their percentage from being able to stop your hand trap, but in any other instance that isn't a combo deck, people love Called by the Grave just because it's such a good generic option to deal with hand traps that I think it was a really bad hit overall, and I think a lot of people tend to agree with that. I guess we'll have to see as the format progresses, but the semi-limitation on this card did not seem justified, in my opinion. Another deck that is a loser here is Pendulum. Now, Heavy Metal Foes Electromite did go to 1, and by no means is Pendulum unplayable, but having 1 Electromite really hurts the deck because I feel it becomes a lot more of a glass cannon in that it's not able to assemble these ridiculously absurd boards like it was able to before. It's still able to assemble very decent and formidable boards, don't get me wrong, with possible, 2 to 3 negations, but if someone's able to play through that, they're not really going to have a strong follow-up because their 1 copy of Electromite has been exhausted. So I think it's a loser here because it got a pretty significant hit with Electromite going to 1. I think it's a good hit, but at the same time, Pendulum is still a loser in this instance. And last but not least, the biggest loser on this entire list, even more so than ABC, is really the format in general. So what do I mean by this? Well, when you kind of look at how I've sorted these decks into these different categories and what's been a winner and what's been a loser, a lot of the decks from the previous format really didn't get hit as hard as a lot of us would like to see. I think a lot of us were anticipating that there was just going to be a mass crucifixion of all of the top decks so that we could kind of see a pretty heavy shift in the meta, but realistically, Goki's still around, Sky Striker's still around, Trickstar's still around, all of the decks that were like the top decks, the tier 1 and tier 2 contenders, they pretty much just got a slap on the wrist and they're still able to do what they do, and they can still do it very well. So I guess the 200th YCS will be the first instance where we can see just how big of an impact the list has had, but from what I'm seeing so far, I don't really think the list is going to have as tremendous as an effect as people would like or as people would have hoped. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the winners and losers of this ban list. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video informative, consider backing me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.